Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for coming to my live stream today. Today, we are celebrating 4,000 subscribers on the channel, which I'm very, very pleased about. I've been working on this channel for about 2.5 years almost, so it's great to see that we've had the increase in subscribers that we've had. If you have any questions for me, please let me know in the live chat. Just drop your question there. I will try to answer it if it's appropriate. And if you don't have questions, I have a few things I can talk about. So let me know your thoughts and questions in the live chat. For now, I'll begin with talking about the plans for the channel next year in January. I still plan to do regular book reviews on a regular basis. I plan to be doing the regular videos 4 times a week, like you've been seeing, but I'm also going to be adding shorts just in January for now. If they take off real well, we'll plan to do more shorts beyond that. Maybe I'll do some YouTube shorts going into February and beyond. And then if they don't really catch on, probably won't. But if YouTube shorts do catch on, I'll try to do those regularly. And those will be short story reviews. So we have a few people commenting. Lazy Fishy says hello there. Hello, Lazy Fishy. And John A. Douglas, fellow booktuber. Follow his channel as well. Thank you, John. He says good afternoon. Congrats on 4K. Well earned. Thank you. Glad to see different booktubers supporting each other. John says, so what indie fantasy books are you planning on reading or looking forward to in 2024? So if we're talking purely self-published, I only have 2 books on my current plans. One book is the 3rd book in the A Low Country series that Morgan Shank wrote. Morgan Shank wrote the books A Low Country, and the 2nd book was called A Savage Country. The 3rd book, the title will be revealed really soon, as will the cover. I know the title and the cover, but I'm not allowed to say it yet. But that will be revealed very soon, and that book comes out, I believe, in February. So I'm excited to read that one. And then, actually, interesting enough, the other book I plan to read is John's book. Which, let me grab that real quick because it just came in. John's book is The Black Crown, which just recently published. I know it's backwards, I'm sorry. But this book just recently came out. It's a thick chunker. And that's the one on my current TBR. I might get to more later. If you expand indie fantasy to include small-time publishers like Baen, which are connected with a big publisher, Simon & Schuster, but they kind of operate like a indie publisher, then I have a ton of Baen books on my list as well. Kublai Khan says hello. Saint says just joined a month ago. Love the channel. Thank you so much, Saint. That's very kind of you. I thought I would talk also about some different series I plan to read, some different schedules. JD Sutter says howdy. Hello, JD. That I do plan next year. I will continue doing my Star Trek reads that I've done. I usually do about 1 or 2 a month. Marco Major. Hey, it's me, Warren. Hello, Warren. I plan to do those Star Trek books. Also, of course, the Star Wars book reviews. Also, I plan to do, I try to do 2 fantasy books and 2 sci-fi books. And then the last 2 books will be kind of toss-ups. They might be YA or legal thriller or different genres depending on what it is. This year, like I was kind of all over the place. Some months were super sci-fi heavy and some months were super fantasy heavy. I'm going to try to keep it balanced next year. This year I'm already on book 129 for reading. So 129 is pretty good. That's my record so far. Next year, I doubt I'll get that many again. I mean, it's possible, but I doubt I will. So my goal for next year is just to do 100. If you, I want once again, if you have any questions for me, if you have anything you want to discuss, any other discussion points, leave them in the live chat there. I'll be happy to talk about them. I can also show some books I've recently received. I have another comment from Nuber 375 says, "Howdy, love the channel. Listening to Thrawn Alliances, your channel helped me get back into books after a negative experience in school." I'm sorry. It's really tough getting kids to read in school. And I can say that as a teacher trying to get kids to read, it's tough. And so I picked out the books I loved as a kid and brought them to my classroom. And I thought kids are going to love this. Kids didn't pick them up. Kids didn't care. Kids didn't read them. And I was like, what on earth is happening? I picked the books I loved the most. Like, it's so hard to find a way to get kids into reading books in school. So I totally understand. I totally understand that. But I'm glad you're enjoying Thrawn Alliances. I still hold personally that it is the weakest in the that Thrawn trilogy. I still think that the first Thrawn book is like one of the best canon books ever for Star Wars, and then Treason is second, and then I would say Alliance is for third. But I'm glad you're enjoying it. Cable Wright says, "How did you like A Stitch in Time by Andrew Robinson?" I can't find it. It's nowhere in my local bookstores, and it is the single Star Trek book that it's like, if I see it, I will absolutely buy it because it's written by the actor who played Garrick. Garrick is becoming one of my favorite characters in the literature. I just read The Missing by Una McCormick, which was a fantastic book. The Missing is just truly wonderful. My review will go up eventually, but Garrick makes an appearance in that book. But I do intend to read A Stitch in Time if I can ever find it. It's just so hard to find. I know they just did an audiobook that they just published with him doing the audio, and I know there's the ebooks out there, but I don't read ebooks. I don't ever read ebooks really. So, um, let's see. Next comment. It says, "Are you going?" Marco Major says, "Are you going to do more Star Wars?" Of course. Oh, of course. I have plenty of. My plan is to do one Legends novel each month and one canon novel. That's quite a lot. This year, I tried to do 2 Legends novels a month in the second half of the year to try to do the whole Fate of the Jedi, and then I did one canon novel, and it just got me a little burned out. So I'm going to just do one canon novel, one Legends novel, but I also have a ton of topical videos on rankings, videos on news, videos on other topics for Star Wars. So there will be a ton of Star Wars videos coming. Saint says, "You influenced me to read Master and Apprentice which I finished 2 days in 2 days. Definitely my favorite canon novel now." Oh, I'm so glad. I'm so glad that you enjoyed that book. I still think that as just a singular novel, that is the best canon novel. I think that is a great entry point. It feels so much like an adult version, a novel for adults that is much longer of the Jedi Apprentice series. I think it just so perfectly gets Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan. It feels perfectly prequel, specifically for the Phantom Menace, and it just really explores the Jedi and the Force and all that stuff really well. So I'm glad you're enjoying that. Marco Major says, "What's your favorite book?" Certainly has to be Elantris by Brandon Sanderson. My favorite book of all time. Everyone else gives me grief for enjoying that book, but I love Elantris. It's such a great book. I love Elantris. Jonathan says, "Any advice for getting out of a Star Wars reading slump?" Well, there's a couple of things. One is just read something else and then come back to Star Wars after a little bit. That happens. Also, if you're finding a specific author or a specific series or a specific type of book in Star Wars isn't working for you, try doing something totally different. If you're finding that you're just not liking, let's say you're having a little bit of trouble with the High Republic, maybe go and read a standalone like the new Inquisitor novel, Rise of the Red Blade, or go and read Master and Apprentice or something like that. So read a standalone that will kind of, you get the complete story in that story, and you're getting a different writing style than in maybe that big series. That's probably the best advice, other than go read something else and come back to Star Wars after you do that. That's the best thing I could say. Let's see. Nooper says, "I could see your criticisms already, but I'm such a Anakin Vader fan that I don't care." Yeah, I understand. If you're a huge Anakin and Vader fan, which I enjoy them as characters, you're gonna love that part of the book. Just for me, it didn't propel itself, and the style just wasn't my favorite. The style he used for Thrawn and Thrawn Treason is just on point. JD Sutter says, "Have you read the second John Cleaver trilogy or only the first one?" I've only read the first one because I can't find the second one anywhere. They have the second trilogy at my local library, but I do not read books from my library because I buy all my books because I want to be able to have them. So I haven't found them yet. That being said, I intend to one day. I might ask for them for birthday or Christmas one day, but for right now, not yet. But I do intend to read them because I loved that first John Wayne Cleaver. For those of you who don't know, John Wayne Cleaver trilogy is the I Am Not a Serial Killer by Dan Wells, followed by Mr. Monster, and I Don't Want to Kill You, which is just a terrific trilogy. Just a terrific trilogy. John Douglas says, "Do you think we're ever going to see the end of Game of Thrones, or are you like me? Have you thrown in the towel?" I mean, I'm usually optimistic. I think it's entirely possible we could. The most likely option, unfortunately, I think, is that posthumously they'll have someone go through and compile his notes. I think, from what I understand from reading all his blog updates, we have enough story that they could just edit down and release Winds of Winter now. But we still have A Dream of Spring afterwards, and I don't think he has anything on that yet. So will we see the whole series completed? I can't give anything too definitive, but if we'll at least see the next book, I think that they'll have enough that whether he dies before he finishes it or finishes it first, we'll have enough to get a finished product eventually. But it's ridiculous that he makes people wait this long. I mean, Sanderson will probably finish the entire Stormlight archive in the time that he releases by the time he releases Winds of Winter, which is crazy. Next comment I see is, "I'm a Star Wars EU veteran. What was your favorite and least favorite books from the expanded universe?" My favorite book is Kenobi by John Jackson Miller. It is a terrific book exploring Kenobi on Tatooine and really seeing everything from the people's perspective on Tatooine. It is a genius book. One of my favorite media tie-in books of all time. I would also like to put a quick tip in for the Hand of Thrawn duology, which just was, I thought, hilarious and really fun, and really does a good job of wrapping up the whole Bantam era of publishing. As far as least favorite, I have a couple on that list. One would be the Corellia trilogy from Roger McBride Allen. Didn't love that. Also, really didn't care for the what's that called? The Before the Storm. What's that trilogy called? By uh, Michael P. QB McDowell. That one was really low on my list. I also really didn't care for Shatterpoint. My hot take that I always get in trouble for is I did not like the New Jedi Order novel Traitor by Matthew Stover. Everybody loves it. One of my best friends just read it and loved it. It's like the one New Jedi Order book I don't like. So those are my thoughts on that. I have a comment from Jeffrey M. Says, thanks for the quality reviews. I gave David Weber a try because your recommendations. Enjoyed the first Honor Harrington books. That's great. I hope you make it to book 4. Book 4, Field of Dishonor, is the best book I've read of the 6. I think 4, 5, and 6 are better than 1, 2, and 3 when it comes to his Honor Harrington novels. I've only read the first 6. I have book 7 to read in Q1 2024. So I'm excited to get to it. But man, that's a special series, especially if you're like me and you grew up watching the TV series. I think it was for A&E. It's the Horatio Hornblower series. If you enjoy that style of storytelling, it's that, but with spaceships instead of regular ships. But it's that series, the Honor Harrington series, there's a reason he's written like so many books and why they keep publishing them, because they're so good. Let's keep going through. I see Sean Craper, it's great to see you, says, really enjoy your channel. Your excitement is contagious. Not a lot of channels review tie-in and spin-off novels. People are missing out on some really fun books. Exactly. There is an entire genre of media tie-in fiction that people don't talk about. You have people who are fantasy sci-fi book reviewers, and then you have just a few people who will read like one like they'll read a few Star Wars novels and then just quit it, or you have someone like Star Wars Explained who only read Star Wars, which is good. We need people like him, but we need the people who are tie-in fans. You read Star Wars, you read Star Trek, you write Halo novels. I have a friend, Matthew, who works with the Paper Books YouTube channel, and they're dedicated to talking about novelizations, which is another form of tie-in material. Tie-in fiction is really good, really fun. It's an easy way to get people into books, and I wish more reviewers talked about it, but it's just so sad that we don't. So Marco Major says, what's your favorite Star Wars book? Talked about this a little bit. Kenobi for the Legends line, and then Master and Apprentice for the canon line. Both terrific books. Jonathan F. says, is the Black Fleet Crisis worth reading? I recently got it to really cheap at a used bookstore. That's the trilogy. I couldn't remember the title of Black Fleet Crisis. I think it's very skippable, and I did not appreciate a lot of what they did, particularly with Luke in that trilogy. I just didn't like what they did with Luke in that trilogy. That being said, you might find it enjoyable. There are a few scenes that I certainly remember from that trilogy, so maybe someone else will be able to give you more positive thoughts on that one. Rob Schwartz says, nearly a year since I started following you. Awesome to see the channel grow. Thank you, Rob. Nuber says, what Legends book series would you recommend? I'm having a bit of a lull after finishing EOD. EOD. What does EOD stand for? Why am I blanking? I feel like I should know this. Anyway, I will say that if you have gotten far enough in the timeline, the New Jedi Order is just so refreshing and so exciting and feels like you're watching a TV show unfold in book format. I would say that one is really great. If you need like something quick, that's just a shorter series like a trilogy or a duology, or something like that. The X-Wing series, you have the 4 books by Stackpole, and then 3 by Alston, and then they go back and forth on the last couple. Those books are also really good. So let me continue on thinking of other books that might get you into things. I mean, of course, I mentioned the Hand of Thrawn. The Hand of Thrawn duology also is just very good. So let me keep seeing something else. I see John Douglas says, Black Fleet Crisis is totally meaningless in the scheme of things. The villains never come back again. Yeah, I'd have to agree. Eye of Darkness. Okay. Thank you for helping with that, Nuber. Eye of Darkness. Yeah, I really loved Eye of Darkness. I thought it was great. But yeah, you have to once it's done, you're like, okay, where do I go next? Next comment I have is Raise the Dead. Hello, Ray. Says, after watching your video on John Grisham books, I started reading A Time to Kill and loving it so far. Great to read a crime novel from a lawyer's point of view. Well, he's got like 50 books from the lawyer's point of view, if you like that. I will say that that is the first one I started reading too, and it was such an eye-opening experience for a different genre of storytelling, and I really enjoyed it, and it opened me up to John Grisham books. I personally think Sycamore Row, which is a sequel that he wrote like 20 years later, I think that's a better book than A Time to Kill. I think much more enjoyable. I think it also is very deep. It's got very important themes. And then I would also highly recommend The Litigators. I think The Litigators is up there for my favorite Grisham book, just because it was so good, and it's much lighter. It's more popcorny, more fun than the A Time to Kill books. JD Sutter says, have you ever listened to the Star Wars radio drama? Highly recommend if you haven't. And Sachs says, Leia is amazing. There's a couple of radio dramas, I believe. I don't listen to that too much. I have listened to a few audiobooks, but I'm not someone that really listens to storytelling as much. I am a visual person. I need it to be on the page. And of course, I watch movies and TV, so I do get it that way too. But I prefer if there's a print version. So I haven't read or listened to those before, but I could one day, especially if I have a big commute somewhere. I used to in college. I had to drive 10 hours one way to get home, and then 10 hours to go back to college. And I did that about 4, 5, 6 times a year, depending on what time of year it was. And so I had big trips where I would listen to something, and that's the only time I really listened to audiobooks. And I listened to a lot of podcasts during that time. I haven't had to do that in the last year and a half because I've just lived in, the place I've lived now, which is near all my family, so I don't have to travel anymore. So I just really haven't done audio as much. Uh, Next comment says, William Gass says, "What books are you trying to get your kids reading?" I tried to get them with Narnia that I put in the classroom. I tried with some Star Wars books. There are some new Star Trek kids books, which I found really engaging. And then I also tried Bionicle, which the boys enjoy Bionicle, but just getting them to pick up the book is like pulling teeth. Girls don't care for that as much. Rob Schwartz says, ever have a Brian Lee Durfee reading volume type of month where it's 15 plus books? Yes. This summer, I did like 15 and 17 books in June and July. It was terrific. Really helped my overall monthly, my overall scores for the year. Usually summertime. So June and July, I usually run up the score. And then surprisingly, it's usually December that I run up the score, because December I usually have more time off because I'm a teacher, and also just because I feel the weight of the end of the year coming, and so I tend to really prioritize time with reading and run out the clock. I don't know if this December will be the same, but that's usually how it is, and so that is those are usually the months that I have the crazy reading months. On average, I'm between 9 and 11. That's usually the number of books I read, 9 to 11. But it can change. I did have one month this year that was 6 books, I think. That was frustrating. I was really disappointed in myself. So, but I love Brian Lee Durfee, so I love that you referenced him. Marco Major says, "What's your favorite Halo book?" Well, Halo is something I'm very much new to. I'm new to the thing, so I only have one book that I've read, but I have 2 more books on my plans to read, and it is called, I believe it's called First Blood, or is it New Blood? New Blood, sorry, New Blood by Matt Forbeck. That's the first one. It's almost a novella because of how short it is. It's like 190 pages, so it's pretty short. But I do have 2 other books. I have Point of Light and Divine Wind on my shelves to be read eventually. It just depends on when I can fit them in. And I have other tie-in books here. I have a Gears of War book. I have some novelizations from some movies. So that's my those are those. Meep says, "I like Halo: The Rubicon Patrol." Ooh, I'll have to look up that one. I don't know that one. Thankfully, the Halo universe is much more accessible than Star Wars, because I think there's only like 20 or 25 Halo novels, whereas Star Wars, they have like 250 by now just for adults, and then for if you include Star Trek, it's like 800 books. Whew, Star Trek, it's crazy. I've been reading for years and I barely scratched the surface. Jonathan F says, "What inspired you to become a teacher?" Well, most of my family's in education. My dad is an administrator and was a teacher back in the day. My sister is a math teacher. I really like history. I loved history in school. I loved school in general, although didn't love math or science. But I loved English and Bible and history class, and so that's why I became a history teacher. And then also, it's just that it's a way to blend certain loves. I can talk about reading in class, I can talk about history, I can talk about politics, which I love, I can talk about government, things like that. So the next comment I see on here says, Nuber says, "Have you ever read any of the Doctor Who novels? Human Nature's great." I haven't read Doctor Who, but I'm interested in it. I know that there's certain authors. I know Una McCormick has written Doctor Who material before, and she writes a lot of great Star Trek books. I know that Cavan Scott has written Doctor Who material before, and he's written great Star Wars books. So there are authors that I'm familiar with, and I believe James Swallow has participated with Doctor Who, but I'm not entirely sure. But I would love to get into Doctor Who, but they don't really have them in bookstores in the U.S. They really aren't on the shelves, especially at used bookstores. I just if I saw them, I might be more amenable to getting them, but they really just don't have them here in the U.S. Let's see. Marco Major says, "Do you have Norse mythology books? If so, what's your favorite?" I don't have any Norse mythology books. I know Neil Gaiman did one recently. That's really popular. But I don't have any others. I'm sorry. Justine Clifford Stacks, hello, says, "Did you read the Red Rising saga by Pierce Brown?" I did. I read the first 2 books. I enjoyed them, but it was a long time ago. I own book 3, might read it eventually. And then I know they have books 4, 5, 6, and we're anticipating a book 7 coming out soon. So the book reviewers I follow, particularly Mike from Mike's Book Reviews, raves about the Red Rising saga. He loves it. So I'm really interested in reading in reading the third book eventually, Morning Star. But I can point to it. It's on my shelves. Meep says, "Heads Up, Divine Wind, and Point of Light are the most novels in 2 different universes, in 2 different series. There's like 30 plus Halo novels now. Well, that's still manageable. I'm glad that most recent novels in 2 different series. I'll have to look into that because they don't. That's the problem with certain publishers. I would say particularly Gallery Books, who publishes the Star Trek stuff now, and they publish Halo. They are not very good at being clear about series. They're not very good about being clear about other books that the author's written. They just kind of they occasionally throw in a list of other Star Trek or Halo novels, or they might mention the author's works at the back of the book, but they don't say, hey, it's part of this trilogy or it's this series or things like that. So it's kind of difficult. Bert, oh, thank you so much, Bert, for the super chat. That is so kind. I really appreciate it. It does help me with being able to buy books. It says, "Congratulations on 4,000 subscribers, Jonathan. I admire your grind and consistency." Thank you so much. I do appreciate it, being able to talk about books here. I'm glad that people are here to talk about it, because a lot of my friends in my area, I'm not able to talk about books with because they don't read, or if they do, they read contemporary fiction or nonfiction genres I'm not too entrenched in, and so I can't really have big conversations about books with them, or they read YA and stuff. So I'm trying to find friends online who I can talk about books with, and it's great. And I'm hoping to get other people to read as well. Marco Major says, "Do you have Percy Jackson?" No, but I've been curious about the series because I know some people who really loved it and some people who didn't. So I don't know whether, and when it was described to me, I'm just not sure if the style of storytelling will be most enjoyable to me. But I'm totally willing to pick it up one day. Are you interested in Malazan Book of the Fallen by Stephen Erickson, or is it too dense for you? It is absolutely too dense, but I read the first book. I have the first book somewhere. Oh, I have Gardens of the Moon, and I own book 2, Dead House Gates. And the biggest thing that has me encouraged to read Dead House Gates is that I've been told it's from like totally different characters' perspectives. So that makes me feel I might actually be able to I don't have to reread the first book because it's told from other characters' perspectives. But because of how dense the first book was, and I just really didn't understand it or remember too much from it. I read it 2 years ago in the summer, and I honestly do not remember the story that much. I just remember how tough it was. But there's so many people in the fantasy community who talk about the love of when you finish Malazan. There's this, completion to it, this kind of feeling of finishing everything that you just love so much. So I'm just like, man, I got to grind through and get through it. But tomes take me longer because I don't schedule them as often, because I read fewer books and therefore don't have as many books to publish on review on the channel. The more I read longer books, the fewer book reviews you see, the fewer videos you see, the less discussion I have. And I don't want to fill up too much on ranking videos and other stuff. So that's why I typically read books that are 300 to 400 pages, because that's generally my sweet spot. But I do 1 or 2 books that are, tomes, and then 1 or 2 books that are a little bit shorter. So the next comment I see is from Jonathan. Says, "Do you feel excitement or dread when you have to put up another bookshelf in your room, having to put it together, mount it, etc.?" I have put together so many bookshelves. I can do it in under an hour, or not under an hour, right at an hour. My record is 1 hour and 6 minutes. The last one I did in 1 hour and 12 because I got a little tired, but I can do it really fast now, to the point that my dad got bookshelves and said, "Hey, I really don't want to do it. Just you do them, you enjoy them." And so I was like, "Hey, I'll do it." So I feel excitement about getting new bookshelves for a couple of reasons. One, because I have more places to store my books. Two, I feel more accomplished. It means I'm reading more. It means I'm buying more. I'm getting more books. So I feel more excited about it. So I do like that feeling. And also, my goal is to one day be able to have a room that is 360 filled with books. And in terms of number of bookshelves, I'm about 40% of the room I have is surrounded by books, but they don't go all the way to the ceiling. The books are only about 5 feet tall. So because of that, I need to go out eventually and buy bookshelves that are taller, that are more like 7 or 8 feet, to make it all the way to my ceiling. But I'm well on my way towards having that. I currently have 900 books in my collection right now, 830 of which are fiction. And so I read that if you have 800 novels or 800 books, you have a library. So I am a librarian because I have a library. So I think it's kind of funny. So next comment I see is from Joseph Mann. It says, I am currently reading through all the Star Wars Legends books in chronological order, and I'm reading through the Clone Wars at the moment. What are your least favorite novels in the EU? In the Clone Wars, I didn't love Shatterpoint. I also didn't love Approaching Storm. I also didn't love the Black Fleet Crisis or the Corellian trilogy, although the Corellian trilogy really plays a big deal in the Legacy of the Force series later on, kind of. I didn't love the Bounty Hunter Wars trilogy. I wanted to so bad because I was so excited. I read it around the time the Book of Boba Fett came out because I was kind of building anticipation for a bounty hunter story, and I just didn't enjoy that. And I really enjoyed Book of Boba Fett. That is like my one of my hot takes is that I thought Book of Boba Fett was so entertaining. It's not the best Star Wars series, but it's so entertaining. But the Bounty Hunter Wars just didn't work as well for me. So the next comment I have is Jonathan F says, have you ever read or thought about reading Yoda Dark Rendezvous? I just bought it a few months ago. I have it. Basically, I had a plan to do a bunch of standalones or trilogies for Star Wars, and then when I got the Fate of the Jedi series, which is 9 books, I said I'm going to read that through all together, and that was the only Legends books I've been reading for this half of the year, and so ever since about August, and so that means that it took up the second half of the year. Well, I'm almost done. I'm reading the last 2 books in December. I'll have them done pretty soon. And so because of that, I have more Star Wars Legends books, like trilogies or standalones, that I'll be able to get to. So just tipping my hat so you all know, I plan to do the Han Solo trilogy, not the Brian Daley one, the AC Crispin one. I have that on my shelves to do in January, February, and March. And then I'll probably do some standalones like Yoda Dark Rendezvous, maybe the duology, the MedStar duology that I still need to read. Maybe I'll do Crystal Star then, although I'm a little nervous about reading Crystal Star, but I'll get to those eventually. Luxon18, hello, says, apologies if this has been already asked, just joined the stream. What sort of nonfiction books do you enjoy, and how often do you read nonfiction? I read nonfiction sporadically. It's not regular like fiction for me. I might do one every couple months. Just because I don't feel comfortable talking about it on the channel, because it tends to be really, a lightning rod of topics, especially the ones I read. I read a lot of political books from politicians or from analysts. I also read a lot of books that are like strategy books. So I really enjoyed The Prince by Machiavelli. I really enjoyed The 48 Laws of Power, The Laws of Human Nature, both of those by Robert Greene. I really enjoy books like biographies of presidents and books that are talking about the ins and outs of politics, because that was my major in college, and that's what I really enjoy analyzing. I love analyzing polls. If I could be an analyst on polls, that would be my one of my dream jobs. And so that's what I like, reading about that type of stuff in nonfiction. Matthew says hi. Great to see you, Matthew. Saint says, do you think reading will be more popular in 20 years or even less? I think it's going to be about the same, because we have, but we're constantly talking about how the publishing industry is going to die. It's doom and gloom. Think bad things happen. And then in about 2010, the ebook revolution happened, and more people got into books than they had before. And then you had audiobooks which have been around for a while, just exploded with things like Audible and with these subscriptions, and with now Spotify. People are doing audiobooks, and they're kind of hybriding them by doing Audible and reading the book at the same time. And then you have now indie publishing, and I don't think it's going to go away. It's going to be it's getting harder and harder to get kids into reading, but I think it's going to be about the same percentage of the population regularly reading that it is now. That's my my prediction. Cole Dole Room says the Horus Heresy book series are worth reading. Takes place in the Warhammer universe. Any interest? Yes. Remember how I talked about how Star Trek has like 800 books? I've been told that the Horus Heresy and Warhammer both have hundreds of books, and that is a series that I'm a little nervous about. And as I said, there aren't many people into tie-in fiction, so there aren't many book reviewers who are talking about this is where to start in the Horus Heresy, at least that I've seen. There's not many that I know that are talking about that type of stuff, so I've been a little bit curious. I do know James Swallow has written some Horus Heresy novels, and he's an author I like to follow. So if he has any standalones, I would be really interested in getting into those. But I've never gotten into any of the Warhammer or Horus Heresy books, but I'm totally interested because, again, I love tie-in fiction. Have you ever downright hated a Star Trek or a Star Wars book? Yes, I have. Should I reveal it? I'll reveal it. Ronin by Emma Miko Candon. Hated that book. And then for Star Trek, How Much for Just a Planet? Hated that book. But I don't talk about that very much, so I've said it and moving on. What's the review on the newish reading chair for your studio tour? Oh, that chair is great. Totally worth the price. Worth every penny I spent on it. It was expensive. But it was totally worth it. I've found that reading is still really enjoyable there. It's really great. The one problem that I have with it is that I get so comfortable that I won't want to move. And so after reading for a little while, I'll just pull out my phone and start watching something on it. And because I'm just that comfortable. Whereas before, I'd read for a couple hours, then I'd go walk around and then go read for a couple hours. And so I need to pace myself better with this because it's just so comfortable. And I fall asleep and take naps more often than I used to because it's a pretty comfortable chair. But it's really worth it. It's super comfortable. It has it has the cup holders. It has the charging cord for my phone. It's got the stuff that I can put stuff in there. It's a great chair. And I got it from my local furniture store. I don't remember the name of the store. I believe it was Ashley. I believe it was Ashley Furniture Home Store, but I might be wrong. Brevin for level 7. Hey, that's Caleb from Caleb Likes Books. If you want a great book review channel, go to Caleb Likes Books. He is a great book reviewer. He's great. He says, "Hey, Jonathan, forgot you were doing this stream. I'm sorry I'm late." Oh, great to have you. Jonathan F says, Book of Boba Fett was very fun watch despite the messy story. I agree. Ramses says, hi, curious, just discovered your channel last week. Are you covering any of the Star Wars TV series? Would love to hear your thoughts on the rest of the material within the canon. I am a book review channel. That is almost exclusively what I talk about. I do occasionally talk about these are tie-in books to movies, or hey, you liked Ahsoka, read these books, or did you like Book of Boba Fett, read these books. I'll do those types of videos. And then I will also do videos talking about if I could make a TV show based off a book, this is how I would do it. Or if I would make a movie based off a book, this is how I would adapt it. But I don't review movies or TV because I want this to be a book-related channel. And so many of my favorite book-related channels started talking about movies and television, and that's what made them take off. And so they abandoned the book stuff, and I'm trying to elevate the book stuff to try to get people more into books. So that's why I haven't talked about the TV shows. Not that I haven't loved them, because I've loved them. Ahsoka, fantastic. Book of Boba Fett, really entertaining. Mando seasons 1 and 2, amazing. Season 3, not so much. But Mando seasons 1 and 2 were amazing. Andor, spectacular. It's truly spectacular. Even if you've sworn off Star Wars, you should try Andor because it's spectacular. So that's what that is. Next on, I have Joseph Mann says, I'm glad to hear you aren't a fan of Shatterpoint. I really didn't enjoy that book. It was one of my least favorites so far, but all the reviews I found online raved about it, thought I missed something. It's much darker and it's got much a more hard hitting nature to it. And so if you're someone who enjoys lighter stories, it's not going to jive for you. I'm the type of person, I'm okay with deep stories, but I don't like dark stories. And so because of that, Shatterpoint and Matthew Stover's style. He is a great guy. Matthew Stover is, and I'm interested in reading some of his non-Star Wars books just to test it out, but I've just learned his Star Wars style just isn't for me. But I'm okay with that. I'm so glad that other people enjoy those. Ramsey says, "Did you enjoy Indiana Jones and Willow? Are you referring to the more recent ones? Indiana Jones: Dial of Destiny was fine. It was fine. I enjoyed it more than the Temple of Doom, and I enjoyed it about on the same level as Crystal Skull, but it was nowhere near as good as the other ones. Willow, the TV show, I gave up after 2 episodes, and I was gonna go back to watch it, but then they removed it from Disney Plus, the TV show, so I can't watch it. But Willow the movie is amazing, top tier." Belltube says, "Stopping in to say congratulations on a really big milestone." Thank you, Belltube. Joseph Mann says, "I always wish I could dedicate more time for me to read. How do you organize yourself to read so much?" Well, I specifically I'm a goal-oriented person, and I set specific goals. I say, I'm going to read for this much each day. I'm going to read this many pages. I'm going to read this book in this many days, and I'm going to read this many books a month. I'm very goal-oriented. And so it's kind of like, it's like a race. I feel like I have to do it. So even if I'm not enjoying a book, I will make sure to finish the book because I want to complete the book, count it in the pile, count it, and I will continue reading. That's just the style reader I am. It doesn't care whether I'm stuck on a book. I will continue reading because that's my job. I feel obligated to. And it doesn't make me enjoy books less. A lot of people said they feel like they would enjoy books less with that mentality. I'm loving the books I'm reading mostly. It's just that I just have the mentality of I will not stop. I will carve out the time. And for instance, yesterday I had some family stuff going on, a birthday party for someone in my family, and I had a movie that I was going to see with a friend after work. So I didn't read it all yesterday, but after live stream, I'm planning on reading for the rest of the afternoon and evening tonight. And I try to read a lot I try to read about 2 hours each night, but sometimes it's only like an hour. So it's not every day that I get it, but it's most days. That's how I do it. Revan1207 says, "I'd like to check out Warhammer books sometime. Don't know much about it, but it seems like a neat setting." Exactly. Spider, great to see you, says, "I noticed that you've not read a lot of Michael Reeves' Star Wars EU books. Just letting you know that most of his books are connected. They have a lot of the same characters." Interesting. The first book of his I intend to read next year is Shadowhunter. I do intend to get to that. And I think he wrote some books with Steve Perry, who is the author of Shadows of the Empire, which I have mixed feelings about. Luxon says, "Are there any books that you hated or disliked on the first read that found upon revisiting the book at a later date you actually enjoyed, or vice versa? If so, what books and why?" Well, to talk about books that I didn't like initially, but books that grew on me over time, the Rune Lords series, I thought they were like 7 or 8 out of 10 when I initially read them. And now I would consider it my favorite fantasy book series. And it's weird that it's after the books I finished reading them that in my mind and in my estimation, I feel like they grew on me and I loved them more. I didn't hate them. I enjoyed them, but now I just absolutely love them. If there's books I hated, but on reread, or at least over time, I enjoyed more. I don't know. That's a tough one. I'm going through my book list in my head. Um, I don't know. I will say a book series that I really enjoyed, but as time went on, my estimation of it went down, is the Alphabet Squadron trilogy. Over time, that one just didn't work for me. So that's unfortunate. Same with the a smaller book series, the trilogy of the Legacy of the Mercenary King. That series, it started out great, and then each book got worse. And now that I think about the first book, I'm like, I didn't even love it that much. I think it was just because it was shiny and new that I was kind of excited about it. Spider says, "One example being that Darth Maul Shadowhunter is a prequel to Coruscant Nights, even though you wouldn't know that based on the cover title." Interesting. Nuber375 is, do you read historical nonfiction like Killers of the Flower Moon or American Prometheus? If you do, what are your thoughts? I haven't read those specific historical nonfiction. I have read some. I've read The Mysterious Case of Rudolph Diesel by Douglas Brunt that I really enjoyed. And the problem is I remember books by looking at them and then be like, oh yes, that's one. And all my historical books are in the closet at the moment. So I can't look at them for thoughts on them. JD Sutter says, how often do you DNF a book? I used to never abandon books, but I've gotten older. I've found I'm more open to moving on from something that I'm not enjoying. Almost never do I DNF a book. And that is really unpopular in the book space. The reason for me is that, to me, I'm feeling like I can't give you a review, and I feel like it's wasted time if I DNF. If I DNF and I can't give a review for it, it's like I spent however long I started reading it and it doesn't go anywhere. And I won't make a video for a book I DNF'd because I didn't finish it. And I won't give a review, written or starred or otherwise, if I DNF'd a book, because that feels unfair to the author. So to me, I will just power through. And again, I said earlier, I just power through my books. Even if I'm not enjoying it, I'm going to power through because I feel obligated to finish and to keep going and move on to the next thing and keep reading. If I don't enjoy something, I don't enjoy it, I move on. I enjoy 95% of what I read. 95% of what I read is 3-star, 4-star, 5-star, and the majority is 4 and 5-star out of 5. But occasionally I'll read a 1 or 2-star. But that's like, for instance, this year I've read 130 books almost, and I've only had 6 books that I either were 1-star or 2-star. I had 1 1-star and 5 2-star. So that's a pretty good number, a pretty good percentage wise of like to dislike. Animal Mother 80, hello. So Star Wars books definitely than the shows on average. Usually I enjoy books more than the series, although sometimes I enjoy the series more. I think so, but it just depends on what the series is and what the books are. Spider says MedStar is really good. Think you'll probably like it. Also, Michael Reeves, LOL. See, I do have quite a lot of them. I just haven't gotten to them yet. Ramsey says, I didn't mean reviews per se. I just wanted to hear your thoughts on TV or live streams, something more casual. I could talk about them on live streams a little bit more. But the TV stuff tends to be more of a lightning rod. There are people who like absolutely hate Star Wars right now and people who absolutely can't stand if you say anything negative. I'm usually on the more positive side just because that's me. But I could talk about them more in the future. Jonathan Allen says, there are something like 30 books in the Shannara series. I enjoyed the original trilogy. Is it worth completing the series where they start going downhill at a point? I wouldn't say it's like overall downhill. I'd say it's like the ups and downs. Some of the series are phenomenal and spectacular. And then you'll read a trilogy that's not so great. And then you'll read a trilogy that's amazing. And then a trilogy that might be not be so great. So it kind of depends. I would say that for sure, getting to the Gerala Shannara trilogy is totally worth it. And I would also say that most people love the Heritage tetralogy. It didn't work as well for me, but my friend Mike loved it. And then I would say, to me, the finale series that I just finished, the 4 finale books, really were good. And the 4th book really put a nice bow on the series. So I think that there is some value to it. But I really just think you need to determine for yourself. Start reading the next books. And if you don't enjoy them, you can stop or you can keep going. It's up to you. Revan says, speaking of Matthew Stover, whoa, the cat jumped. Sorry. Speaking of Matthew Stover, I adored Trader, but I could definitely see where it wouldn't appeal to you. Probably my favorite New Jedi Order book, though. Exactly. It's funny because I was just saying earlier, you read that book recently. It's my least favorite of the New Jedi Order books, and it's your favorite. But it's just the way people are wired with books. Spider says, will you ever review the Revenge of the Sith novelization? It's absolutely amazing. It doesn't even feel like a novelization of a movie because Matthew Stover makes it that good. I have read it before. I only review books that I have read, most recently. I review the book right after I finish reading it. And so I read that book years ago before I started the channel. And at the moment, I don't plan to do rereads. I only reread like 1 or 2 books per year. I do not reread often, and that's because I want to read new things. And so I might talk about it in a ranking video, or I might recommend it occasionally, but it's not a video I'd make a dedicated review to unless I go and review it, which I could pick it up one day, but it's not guaranteed. Michael Ravenous says, how are books released? I ordered one, comes out 12/12/23. One reviewer has had it for a year. Second reviewer has had it second book this series. What determines that? Well, it's a couple of things. One thing is um, uh, if the publisher is doing ARCs, advanced reader copies, sometimes they send it out. It's usually not a year in advance. It's almost never. Usually it's just a month or two in advance from most publishers that I've worked with, like Random House, Simon and Schuster, and others. That's usually what they do. Now, people who self-publish have a very different ability when it comes to it. They have much more freedom to give out copies or to send ebook links because it costs them nothing to send someone an ebook. So in that case, they might be able to. And sometimes some people are alpha readers, so they're like advising the person as they're writing the book. And then they put the review online well in advance of the book because they enjoyed it or whatever. That's how it works. But usually we get them a couple months in advance. And if you just see someone put just a star rating, and with no context whatsoever, here's a year in advance or 6 months in advance, be doubtful of it because it might just be someone just putting a star rating without even having read it, which is often I find the case. But sometimes legitimate reviewers get it early, but a year early, that's a little crazy. For instance, I have a few books published by friends of mine. I won't reveal who they are, but I got those books about 2 or 3 months early in ebook format, and I read them, and then I got the physical copy when it came out. I Like Mandalorian says, greetings, sir, and most pleased to extend to you the most sincere of felicitations. Your achievement is a testament to your admirable hard work and dedication, surely an inspiration to us all. Thank you, I Like Mandalorians. That was so well worded. I love it. Joseph Mann says, Shadowhunter is one of my absolute favorites. Can't wait to see your review on that one. Animal Mother 80 says, Willow series, meh. I tried to push through if I'm not enjoying a book, so there's no regrets later in case I'm missing out context for future books in a series. Speaking of books I didn't enjoy, the Willow books that George Lucas did with Chris Claremont, I read the first one. Woo! Woo! C. Spider says, have you read any books by Tom Clancy or Lee Child? Yes, I read The Hunt for Red October, which is one of my favorite movies of all time. And I read the book and I loved it. And I read, right before I started this channel, I read the second book, The Cardinal and the Kremlin, which I also really enjoyed. I have 2 other books of his. I have Clear and Present Danger and I have Sum of All Fears, but I've just not been in the mood for them for a while, and also because I've been focusing on other things with the channel. Most of my reading now is dedicated to the channel specific stuff, so the stuff that I wouldn't put on the channel, and I might put those on the channel if I read them. I don't know. Lee Child, I would be very interested to get into. My dad got into CJ Box recently, and he's been trying to get me to read it. He's like, you enjoy this type of book, you're going to enjoy CJ Box. And he's read like 10 of the books in the last like 6 months. So he's really getting into CJ Box. So I might read him eventually because my dad owns them. Luxon18 says, I really recently watched your interviews with Timothy Zahn and other authors. I loved the relaxed feel to the interviews, and I thought you did an awesome job. Is this something you'd like to do more of? Absolutely. I would love to do way more author interviews. It's just about scheduling them and making sure the authors work together. Some authors who are bigger, and when I say bigger, I mean they have bigger sales and they're more big, well-known names like Timothy Zahn, are incredibly hard to convince to do book interviews. And then some people are more amendable, but I'm not always interested in everyone. So it just kind of depends. Next, we have Revan 12, but I'd absolutely love to do more. And I do have one interview with an author coming on Monday, and that announcing who that interview is with, I'll announce it now. It's with Mona Lisa Foster, who wrote the novel Threading the Needle, which I actually just got, Threading the Needle. So I'm interviewing this author, Mona Lisa Foster, and the book review comes out next week as well as the interview. So that I'll do that. Revan says, any rereads planned for next year? I think I'll be focusing more on rereads, maybe aim for at least one per month. Lots of stuff I'm on a review on the channel, but haven't read recently enough to do so. That's the big reason I would want to do rereads, is so that I could do reviews on the channel. I only reread the Thrawn trilogy this year and maybe 1 or 2 other books. If I reread anything, what would it be? I'd love to reread Elantris again. I always want to reread that. I'd also really enjoy rereading maybe some other fantasy sci-fi books that I have on the channel. The Cobra trilogy by Timothy Zahn. That I would enjoy rereading for the channel as well. But those are the only rereads I would consider. I like Mandalorian says, if one is permitted to ask a question, there it is. If one is permitted to ask a question, would you mind sharing with us your perspective on collecting rare books and whether you own any particularly noteworthy editions? I do have a few noteworthy editions. I do own a German copy of Kenobi, and it is the first ever signed German edition of Kenobi by John Jackson Miller, which is pretty rare. So I do enjoy having that one. And I have a few hardcovers that are hard to find. I don't go out and buy really expensive books that are like $100 or anything like that. What I tend to do is if I see a book that I know is kind of rare and I see it for a reasonable price, like 10 or 15 or $20 at a used bookstore, I'll pick it up. But I don't buy the crazy expensive rare ones to have because why spend my money on that? I'm making a school teacher's salary. I don't have that money yet. Ramsey says, I have to say I've been enjoying the High Republic. My only note is that it's a bit hard to connect with the characters because they're just perfect in every way. I wouldn't say they're perfect because Elzar Mann has some imperfections in Eye of Darkness. I think some of the other characters seem to have some, but I understand that a little bit. I can understand that a little bit. Nuber says, so what you're saying is that you didn't like the Revenge of the Sith novelization. No, actually, of all the Matthew Stover books, that's my favorite of them that I've read. It's just that I haven't read the book, since I did the YouTube channel, so I haven't reviewed it yet. So that's why I haven't talked about it much on the channel. But I did enjoy it. It was like the other ones I didn't enjoy, like Shatterpoint and Traitor, but that one it was like, yeah, I enjoyed it. It's not. I know everyone else puts it on this crazy high pedestal as their favorite novelization. It's not my favorite novelization. That still goes to the Rogue One novelization, which is not. It's not my favorite Star Wars movie, but I thought the novelization was terrific. So that's. Yeah. Nathan Lowe says, afternoon. Sorry if you have already said this in the past. What would you recommend in regards to a new Star Wars reader? Thanks. Well, first, try to see if there's a book or series featuring your favorite characters or your favorite era. If you're a prequel fan, find something from the prequels. If you're a sequel fan, find something near the sequels. If you're an original trilogy, find that. If you're a big, original characters, Luke, Han, and Leia, the original Thrawn trilogy from Legends in the EU is great. If you are a big fan of like the Jedi and the prequels, I'd say Master and Apprentice from the canon, or Kenobi, or I would even say Cloak of Deception is great. If you like dark side stuff, then I would say Darth Plagueis and the Darth Bane trilogy are well worth it. So there's a ton of different places. As long as you're not doing anything in the post-Return of the Jedi universe after the Thrawn trilogy, I think you could start virtually in a lot of places. I'd also say Shadows of the Empire is an easy one to jump into because you just have to really watch the movies. Spider says, something I've enjoyed reading recently are the Forgotten Realms books, Legend of Drizzt. Yes, if I can find more Legend of Drizzt books in my bookstore, they only have the big bind-ups, and I don't like reading big bind-ups. I prefer individual books. If I can find more of those, I will buy them and read them, but I can't find them. But I have the first six. I have the first six of the Legend of Drizzt. J. Della Beat says, I got an Angel Mass on a whim since you have spoken so positively about it. I hope you enjoy it. I loved it. It was my first just pure science fiction without a tie-in material, without Star Wars or Star Trek. It was just my first science fiction book I read, and I loved it. And I only picked it up because it was Timothy Zahn and because it had a pretty awesome cover, and I really enjoyed it. And that's one I would love to go. We were talking about rereads earlier. I'd love to go back and reread that so I can have a whole dedicated video to it on the channel. Nuber says, when the next Thrawn appearance happens, would you reread the first canon trilogy? That might be worth it. That's a good idea. Maybe when Ahsoka season 2 or the Dave Filoni movie, whichever one comes first, I think I'll try to reread. That's a good plan, Nuber. Let's see. The next comment I see here says, Animal Mother, have you read or done a review yet for the Scholastic Star Wars book Wrath of Darth Maul yet? I have not. I have not read much middle grade. That's one area I'm lacking. Spider says, I've heard of CJ Box and not read him yet. It's someone I've also considered reading. His name's getting out there. And the show, my dad enjoyed the show on Paramount. He really enjoyed that. Joshua Torres says, you stated you're old school, a power reader, and that's hats off to that. But what are your thoughts on consuming books via audiobooks? I don't do it, but if you do it, great. It's getting you into the reading habit and the stories at least, and then you might get into the actual habit of reading physical books eventually. So I think it's great. I have one member of my family who is adamant that if you do audiobooks, it doesn't count. You shouldn't count them in. If you're on Goodreads, you shouldn't count an audiobook as your books you read this year. But to me, I'm kind of like, you know what? If that's how we get people into the storytelling, that's how we do it. Spider says, speaking of Wrath of Darth Maul, Ryder Wyndham wrote 4 amazing biographies of each character from Star Wars. I just got done reading Rise and Fall of Darth Vader. I saw that in a local bookstore and I didn't buy it. They are awesome. Josh Smith says, do you have any interest in the Halo novels? Some are kind of but most of them are great. I would love to read them. I have never played Halo before, except when I played it for 5 minutes at a friend's house years ago. So I would be loved to get into them more. I've only read New Blood by Matt Forbeck. But I own Divine Wind and Point of Light by Troy Denning and Kelly Gay. So I might get into those. Then Animal Mother says, wasn't that Willow book series written by Chris Claremont? Doesn't sound generally liked by many. No, it's not liked by many. I haven't found really people that I've online that loved that book series. It was not well received, but they got the whole trilogy because they had George Lucas behind it, because it was selling okay. And actually, those are pretty rare books. And I found the second book in this trilogy, but I don't have any plans to read it anytime soon. Jeffrey says, do you plan on reading any additional books by Robin Hobb? Yes, I have the first book in the Farseer trilogy that I read. That was the first book review I did for the channel. If we're celebrating stuff, that was the first book review I did for the channel, and I loved it. I enjoyed it, but I haven't gotten into more. But I got the Michael Whalen and Paul Yule covers. I have those now over here, and so I'll get into them eventually. Spider says, have you read Dawn of the Jedi Into the Void? If not, save yourself. It's the worst Star Wars EU book. Interesting, because I know some people who enjoyed it. I won't stop you, of course, LOL. I'm just warning you, if you do read it, you will be confused. Yeah, I have had people tell me they enjoyed it, and some people say no, so I'll have to determine. Jonathan, do you have any pets? I did, but my parents took it when I went to college, and it's been my parents ever since, so not now. But I will one day. My favorite type of animal is a golden doodle, and I want one when I get into a house. It's not feasible in an apartment right now, but if I ever get a house, I will absolutely get a golden doodle. I'll have to spend money on it. So speaking of Zahn's Icarus books, should I get into the Icarus plot not knowing about the Icarus hunt? I think you absolutely can. There will be a few references to the Icarus plot that you might not really remember, or you might not totally understand at the beginning, but he explains everything eventually. So you don't have to have read it, but I think you're enhanced if you do read it. But because the Icarus Hunt was done with one publisher and the Icarus plot is from Baen, which is a different publisher. The first book was Bantam. Now it's Baen. He's with Baen for all the sequels. All the Icarus plot and all the books after that are part of its own series, and they're considering the Icarus Hunt like a weird prequel. And so it's not heavy references to it, it's light references. So I think you absolutely can. And speaking of which, next week, the sequel to the Icarus plot called The Icarus Twin comes out, and I just got my copy. So I'll be reviewing this next week. I'm really excited for it. Revan says, when you're teaching, do you ever use fiction books in your classes, like relating to a book when you're teaching or doing something with your students or reading? Yes, I do often reference it, but my students are 10-year-olds and they do not care about the books I read. They just don't, unfortunately. I have 2 students who are Sanderson fans. One of them's reading Mistborn right now, and one of them is reading the Alcatraz books, and they both love them. And they're only reading it because their parents love it. And the parents I actually know, and I talk to the parents about Sanderson sometimes, but not as much as I would wish, because I just can't connect with kids too much. But occasionally someone will say something about Harry Potter and I'll be able to jump in, or the kids will talk about something else, but it's kind of hard to connect it all the time. I actually use movies more often because it's an easier thing to reference. Prod Roy says, How do you feel about the Old Republic being considered for adaptation? That is the one series I've been waiting for them to do. I think it would be great. There's 4,000 years plus that they could do in the Old Republic. There's thousands of years of storytelling. So you could do a random trilogy here. You could do a duology here. You could do a 10-book series or a 9-book series like The Fate of the Jedi here. You could just do so many Old Republic stories. You could do a movie trilogy and not have it step on any toes anywhere. You could make Old Republic stories for a long time, and I hope they do. That's where I'm hoping they go after the High Republic, which I'm loving, but I'm hoping that's where they go afterwards. Ghoul 181 says, congrats on 4K. Any advice for people who struggle with reading longer series? Read other stuff in between. Don't just try to binge the series. If you're like, read a couple books in between so that you feel like you're getting variety. And then you read a book in the long series and then you go read other stuff. That's the best way to do it. If you try to do like the whole Wheel of Time or the whole Stormlight Archive or the whole something else all at once, you're going to get burned out. It's that's what happens. Noober says, have you checked out The Blade by Charles Soule? Explains the rivalry between Porter Engle and General Vyse in Phase 2. I've heard it's good. Is that a short story or a comic? I'm not sure. It's not a novel because he only has the one novel, Light of the Jedi, and then he's doing the final novel, I think, which Trials of the Jedi, that comes out in 2025. But I haven't read that. But I'd be interested. Josh Smith says, if you're going to read Point of Light, I recommend reading the first 2 books first. Point of Light is the 3rd book in the Ryan Forge trilogy. See, it doesn't say that. It doesn't say anything about being part of the Ryan Forge. How am I supposed to know that? It does not say that anywhere on here. It doesn't say that anywhere on here. How would I suppose? Like, that's why I'm really mad at Gallery. Why don't you put that on your books? Are they afraid people won't pick books because they're 3rd books in a trilogy? Are they hoping that people will be duped into it? Like, that's just so frustrating. I'm sorry. Sorry to vent like that. Spider says, been reading more non-book Star Wars books by Timothy Zahn. My dad surprised me. Dad surprised me with Manta's Gift the other day, so I'm going to give it a read soon. I know a lot of people, including you, have said it's amazing. It's one of my top science fiction novels, my favorite Timothy Zahn novel. It is very much Avatar, but with manta rays in space instead of, blue people. But it is, I think, a brilliant book, and I hope you enjoy it. Revan says, Into the Void is definitely one of the Star Wars books of all time. I knew you were going to say something like that, Caleb. I knew you were going to say something like that. Also, Kelly Gay might be the best Halo author. Interesting, because I know she writes a lot. I know that Matt Forbeck writes some. I know that Troy Denning's written a ton of Halo books. Is Denning good? I really enjoyed Matt Forbeck's book. Is Troy Denning a good author for Halo? I enjoy his Star Wars stuff just fine. And then who are the others? I know that like Bill Dietz did 1 or 2 books and that Eric Nyland did a few, and then they have other authors. Spider says, I want to stay and chat longer, but I got to go. Hope you have a fantastic day. Congrats on 4,000. Actually, I need to leave soon, so I'll finish up these comments and then I'll go as well. But thank you so much for coming today, everyone. I see Prod Roy says, haven't you ever touched a Star Trek book, including the shows? How should I go about reading, watching at the same time? First, get your feet a little bit wet. I would recommend watching Star Trek, the movies 2, 3, 4, and 6. So that's Wrath of Khan, Search for Spock, The Voyage Home, and The Undiscovered Country. If you want to get the original characters, like the Kirk, Spock, McCoy, that type of stuff, that's the top tier stuff. Then for television, I'd recommend watching a little bit of The Next Generation. The highlights, just look up different like best episodes or important episodes for Next Generation because they're kind of standalone-ish. And then maybe the same and then start out a little bit of DS9 and Voyager to see what those are like. And then determine which of that works for you, which characters, which general styles of storytelling work. And then look up different books that in that series for DS9 or for Voyager or for Next Generation. That's the best option I would give you for that. Joshua Torres says, have you ever read Daniel's Key, Flowers of Algernon? I think you'd like it. The author incorporates elements of sci-fi in a bygone era of 1950s New York. Oh, I'm going to love that. That would be so great. I know that Dayton Ward had his book for Star Trek set in 1950s East Coast, and I loved that book. It was a great sci-fi tie-in book. And then I know that the book Rogue Elements from by John Jackson Miller, also Star Trek, incorporates elements of 1930s New York gangsters, which I thought was funny. So I see Nuber says it's a comic miniseries. Everything I've heard about Souls done in Star Wars comics have been great. I've enjoyed some of the comics I've read from him. So Rod Roy says, thank you. I'll look into it. So I haven't, by the way, back to Joshua, I haven't read Daniel Keyes' Flowers of Algernon, but I'll have to write it down for my list. Thank you, everyone who showed up. This was a tremendous live stream. It's great to see so many. This is by far the most people we've had on a single live stream at one time. So it's great to have everyone here. Thank you to those of you like Bert, who did super chats. I really appreciate it. It really helps me be able to buy more books and talk about books more. So until next time, I'm Jonathan, and thank you for watching, everybody.